Hey, what's up, chessman? In today's video, I would like to share with you my preparations against the Scandi. So e4, d5. Now, I love to play the Scandi with black pieces, and I know that some of the white players are annoyed when they have to face the Scandi. So here, let me give you a tip how you can deal with this with the Dunst Gambit. The benefits of the Dunst Gambit are: it is pretty easy to get it on the board, you will get to play fun and attacking chess, and your opponents are likely to mess up in the opening and you will end up in a winning position. We start with the move d3, and 3 out of 4 people are going to capture our pawn, and here we play knight to c3. So kind of urging our opponent to capture even the second pawn, which once again 3 out of 4 people will do, and here we recapture with our light square bishop. In this position, most played move by far is knight to f6. Here we can bring our bishop to g5, and they usually continue with d6. We want to develop our queen to e2, and after they, I don't know, they go no, they go bishop to e7 usually, and here we are able to long castle. So by following the most played moves we reach this position, and already black needs to be aware of the tricks that we have up our sleeve. For example, quite a lot of people here are going to simply short castles, and this is a huge blunder because they will lose their queen. You see, we have this trick of going bishop takes on h7 and grabbing the queen next turn, but let me just explain, it is stronger to first capture this knight on f6. Because if we would capture on h7 right away, then they have the option to recapture with the knight. And after this, they will be able to hold on to that knight and they will have extra piece, although they would lose the queen. But if you capture the knight first, they are kind of forced to recapture the bishop. If they don't and they spot our threat and they try to, I don't know, move the queen out of the way, well, we are already up a piece and winning. But it's actually stronger for them to capture the bishop, and then we can take on the h7. Now the king is forced out of his shell and we get to capture this queen, and in this position it's just winning for white easily. Alrighty, let's go back and let's discuss what to do if your opponent is more mindful of this position and they notice our threat. So they figure out they need to do something about it. There are actually only 2 moves that are played by black pieces, and it's either knight to d7 or bishop to d7 in order to block this file so they don't get hit with the rook. So let's first have a look at bishop to d7. After this we are going to continue with knight to f3, simple development, and here most of the players are going to castle. Our next move is going to be pawn to h4. I love this move. It kind of sends a message to your opponent, like, be prepared to get attacked. And in this position, I would like to discuss 3 moves that are most played by black pieces, and that is pawn to h6, knight to c6, or pawn to c6. And actually all of these 3 moves are leading to a disaster for black. So let's start with h6, which is the most played one. Here we are going to capture the knight with our bishop, so they are naturally going to recapture with their bishop. And here we are going to play queen to e4, threatening a checkmate. So the only logical way to deal with this would be to play g6, but after that h5. And now we are threatening to just open some files and they cannot capture our pawn, because of course the pawn is covering this checkmate. So according to the engine, the best shot for black is to try to go bishop c6 and harass our queen, but our queen is simply going to slide 1 square down, and now it's threatening to, infiltrate on the h file. So the black should avoid this by playing g5, but now, well, hello our old tactics. And after that you simply collect your elo because your opponent just resigned. So let's go back. That was the h6 move, this one. Let's see the knight to c6. If they go knight to c6, we are going to capture this knight once again, and they are likely to recapture with their bishop. And here we can jump scare them with bishop takes on h7 check. And the old-fashioned Greek gifting style attack works like clockwork here. So they are going to capture the bishop, and you go bishop to g8. Bishop. What is this? Knight to g5 check. And black is pretty much done here. Going back to h8 leads to a checkmate in two moves like this. If they decide to move the king to g8, well, then you can still go queen to h5. They need to move the rook to, avoid the checkmate, but you capture on f7, so the king goes to h8 anyway, and you grab this bishop and you just crush them in this way. And if they try to go forward with their king, which is supposed to be the best option for them, well, then simply just queen to e3, and there is no good way for black to deal with this nasty discard check winning their queen. So they would kind of have to capture this knight, but then you can go like, well, thanks for opening up my rook and have a fun running away from my checks. So that would be covering the move knight to c6 in this position. Let's go back and let's discuss pawn to c6. So after pawn to c6, guess what? We are once again going to capture the knight on f6, and after they recapture, here you can actually choose whether you like the Greek gift style attack and you can capture on h7, or you can also play queen to e4, threatening checkmate on h7, so they need to go g6 and you push h5. H5. So both of these attacks work. This is similar to what I've been showing in the previous lines. I just cannot go deeper because I have a small amount of time and I don't want this video to be super long. I hope you see what I did there. According to engine, this is simply winning for white, or maybe not like crushing, but it's winning. So let's go back. And before discussing the knight to d7 lines, I just want to share a quick tip. What if they don't get castled in this position? So we just played, just to remind you, they blocked this d file with the bishop. We played knight to f3, and we were discussing how to attack them if they castle. Well, if they don't castle, then the second most played move is knight to c6, and here I suggest that you move your king to b1. It is kind of a waiting move, and here once again the top played move is short castles, and we will get the same sort of attack as I've been just showing. So here they are likely to go h6, so you grab this knight, they grab the bishop, and you go queen to e4, threatening checkmate, and this will kind of be the same thing. The only difference is that now the knight is on c6 and your king is on b1. So it's very likely to, for your attack to work. All right. So we've been discussing the lines where they blocked the d file with the bishop. Now we are going to focus on knight to d7. After this move, you'll have a choice. You can still go for the same setup with knight to f3 and hope that they will short castle, in which case you can push h4, and this is going to be pretty much the same as before. So if they push h6, you can grab this knight. The difference is that here they can recapture with their knight, but then you hit them with bishop to h7 and grab their queen. And if they capture with the bishop, then it's the same. Queen goes to e4, so you're threatening checkmate, so they need to push g6 and you can push h5 just like before. The problem is that they are not likely to castle, and castling in this position is only the second most popular move. And the most played move here is actually c6, which leads to, equalish game where I haven't been really able to find any sort of tricks or traps for your opponents to fall into. So because of this reason, I actually suggest that you try to push f4. This opens door to new possibilities for your attack, and in this position the most play move for black is castling. After they castle, you can push h4 and you have this kind of an arrow of your pieces pointing at black's king. This cannot, suggest anything good for them. The thing is that this is pretty much unknown territory and there is only like 6 games that reach this position, from which most of the players blundered going b6. Here you can just grab this knight and after they recapture you have queen to e4, threatening checkmate and threatening the rook at the same time. This is kind of a tactic that can occur in many other positions in this Dunst Gambit, so you should be mindful of this. But also I'm kind of imagining that they would try to play h6 in this position to try to get rid of your annoying bishop. So here you can capture the knight. They cannot recapture with their knight because the old bishop to h7 and they lose the queen. So they would have to recapture with their bishop, after which you can attack this bishop with your knight. So in order for them to preserve the bishop pair, they would have to go back, and here you can push g4 and look at your pawns rolling into the attack. According to Stockfish, the best response would be to push f5, but then after takes and takes, you have a crazy looking knight to g5. And with this move, you are threatening to fork the queen and the rook. And there is no way that black can deal with this. If they capture the knight, well, bye bye, this is checkmate in 7 moves. And if they try, I don't know, maybe they would try moving this knight away so this bishop can cover this square. Well, this leads to a disaster because, well, guess what? Check and brr. Alright, well, feel free to analyze these lines for yourselves and let me know if you came up with something in the comments. And now, because this is getting pretty long, let's just go back. There are a few funny lines I would like to show you. You know what, let's go all the way back so we remind ourselves how this opening works. So we go e4, d5, d3, they capture, we go knight to c3, they capture, we recapture. And here, after knight to f6 and bishop to g5, I get this a lot in my games. People are playing bishop to g4, hitting my queen, hoping that I would blunder it. But I play pawn to f3, and most of the times they bring the bishop back to h5. Here I just go about my business. I develop queen to e2, so they continue with e6. Then I go for long castle, and actually here quite a lot of people continue with bishop to e7, which is a disaster because of bishop captures on f6, bishop recaptures, and now bishop to b5 check, and the queen will be lost. But actually in this position most of the players are going to be mindful of such tactics and they will play knight to d7 in order to block this file. Well, then you can continue with knight to h3. They will continue usually with bishop to e7, and after that you have a tricky move, knight to f4. So we are attacking this bishop, and this bishop is only protected with this knight. And if they are thinking they are safe and they can just castle, you can grab this knight and they cannot recapture it. If they recapture it with their knight, well, then bishop captures on h7 and the queen is lost once again. And if they recapture with this bishop, well, then you just win a piece for free. So they cannot just simply castle, they need to deal with these threats, and most people will play bishop to g6. Well, here we can surprise them with knight captures on e6. So of course they are going to grab the free knight, and after that we can take the bishop. So the h pawn is going to recapture, and then our queen can land on the e6 square. And in this position, we are down in material, but black has only one move to survive. And it's not an obvious one. So the move black needs to play here is push the pawn to a6, I mean a5. This is funny. They need to play this in order to have some room for their rook to help survive this attack, which is going to be pretty nasty. But what most of the players tend to play here is a rook to h5, hitting the bishop. So you can grab this knight, and they need to recapture with the pawn, of course. You can add some more pressure with your rook. And in this position, they should play rook to e5. So we are going to trade this, and after they capture with the pawn, you have this queen to g8 check. And they have to block it with the knight and lose the queen. Otherwise, it's a checkmate if they block it with the bishop, because queen to g6 check, king goes to e7, and knight to d5 checkmate. So this was a funny line I wanted to share with you. There is another funny line I want to show you, which actually happened in my game. And in this position, my opponent went knight to c6, I went queen to e2, and here they went bishop to g4, harassing my queen. So pawn to f3. Once again, usually they go back with their bishop, but sometimes they go bishop to a6. A pretty weird square, I would say, because they block their development a little. But this leads to a funny line after long castling. My opponent played h6, trying to get rid of my bishop, but here I went like, oops, and I captured his bishop. The point is that the queen cannot be captured because bishop to g6 is checkmate. So my opponent figured out that he cannot capture the queen, so instead he captured my bishop on the g5 square. Well, here I played bishop to g6. So with this move, I'm pinning this pawn so that he cannot capture my queen, and also I'm hitting his queen. And there is this rule in chess: if your opponent has a choice whether to lose the queen or to get checkmated, they always choose the checkmate. Because in this position, apparently he had to sacrifice his queen and capture his rook, but instead he went queen to c8, and then bishop on f7 was checkmate. By the way, there is a funny counterplay in this line. So after queen captures on e6, black can capture our bishop on d3, and it seems like white is worse because his queen is hanging and also his bishop is hanging. But we have a funny resource of queen to h3, and now we create this spin on this pawn, so our bishop is safe, and their queen is still hanging. So I guess naturally they would try to save the queen by moving it somewhere, and if they move it anywhere, then the problem is that we can capture this knight, and they cannot recapture back because queen to d7 is checkmate. So guys, this is getting pretty long. I'm tired. I had enough. I hope you had enough. I hope you like this gambit. I hope you will use it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments. And thank you. Have fun, take care, and bye.